Welcome back to the channel. I am doing something new today that I'm going to try do every Monday afternoon, morning once the actuals come in, and that is the box office report of week to week. I'm somebody who I enjoy a few things. I enjoy going to the movies, obviously. I enjoy talking about the movies I've seen, but I'm also somebody who really likes statistics and analytics. So one of the things I've always been a fan of doing, way before I even got into watching as many movies as I do, is I love following the box office and what it means for the studios and the movies that are out and the story it sometimes tells in everyday life and such. And going into the weekend, I thought this was an interesting weekend for a box office because we have two holdover movies, like with the Fantastic Beasts, the Secrets of Dumbledore, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, that had pretty strong openings. Both family style films. Maybe Dumbledore not as much. That's more of like a young adult, older adult type audience. And we have three new films coming out today, this weekend, with The Bad Guys, DreamWorks' new animation movie. Um, what else can I say? I'm sure that the Nick Cage movie. I'll remember the title here in a second. The title is so long, and I think I'll go into that a little bit more later on. The Yeah, and then the Northmen, the Norse legend, um, drama action movie that came out over the weekend, and those three movies coming out with the other two, I think is going to lead to a very interesting box office result and kind of a story to be told. A story being told as we're coming out of the pandemic. We're starting to see some of these box office numbers replicate more of what we had pre-pandemic, and getting ready for summer movie season where we're gonna have a lot of big budget, big blockbuster movies coming out every weekend, every other weekend. That I thought this was a good time to start this weekly Monday report. I got it doesn't take too long to put together. I have a nice little table in place, as we can see. This is for the 25th Monday here of April. And these are the box office numbers. I set them up a few different ways. We're going to go over their current week totals, their percentage drops for movies that have been there for multiple weeks, their domestic totals, which is what everything they make in the U.S. and Canada, um, for overall, and their worldwide totals. So that's the movies have made worldwide overall. And I think I'm going to go down kind of to some of these movies. I'm going to go through the top 10, at least in this first week. We'll see if we do this more, as we go on top 10. But I think the second half of the box office this week has a lot that could be told, and it could have a lot of discussion being moved up from what I previously had. But I'm interested to see how this does. Let's go ahead and let's look at the box office report for the 25th of April, this weekend here. Let's go ahead and look. So, right off the bat, we see the bad guys open up number one this weekend with around $24 million. What this tells me, matched with the Sonic the Hedgehog movie right below it, is that the audience that is most likely to go into the theater right now is this family movie audience. A family that's looking to bring not just one, but two, three, four people, with kids and the parents and coming together, as we've seen very strong results from family movies. Now, the Bad Guys was a movie I didn't quite enjoy that much. You can see my review of it down below, but in another video I did that I posted yesterday. But I have to say, the movie clearly had an audience. It had an A cinema score, which is a pretty good score for an audience, and it came out with a pretty strong domestic box office total. And if you look at the worldwide total, 87, a little bit over 87 million, that shows that this movie is not just a popular one here locally in America and Canada, but it's definitely something that's being a hit worldwide as well too in its opening weekend. The Bad Guys was budgeted at around $80 to $90 million, so it wasn't too expensive for an animated movie. This is something coming out of the opening week, weekend, at least here domestically. You're seeing its total kind of match that amount. For most movies to beat their budget and to be profitable in theaters, you got to get around 2 to 3 times as much money as they put into the movie. So the Bad Guys is off to a very, very good start in a movie and comes out of this weekend with a huge headline of not only is it beating the movies that came out this weekend, but it was able to go through and beat both two movies, Sonic and Fantastic Beasts, that have been doing very well, that are more mainstreamy, blockbustery style known properties. So I think that's pretty cool to see an original property in some ways open up very strongly. And again, it shows the family market is ready to go. When I went yesterday, I have to say, even though it wasn't the biggest theater I've seen movies in this weekend, but for a Sunday matinee, it was about 75% full with a lot of people coming in with, parents coming in with the kids around the ages of, I'd roughly say between 6 and 12. So it definitely has an audience, and it definitely performed very well this weekend. Coming in at number two is probably a surprise that, for some, is Sonic the Hedgehog 2. It came in at a little bit over $15 million. When it comes to drop percentages, the way you look at it is, you know, Sonic going into his third weekend, anything that's below a 50% drop percentage in a third weekend movie shows that this movie has a very good connection to a core audience, and that there are a lot of people going back to either re-see this movie, or the word of mouth of this movie is very good that you're getting new people to see it. So Sonic having a drop percentage week to week of only 48% just shows how strong the legs are on this movie, and it's showing again um, that family movie base is willing to go to the movies and, maybe go back to the movies with their kids and stuff like that, and that the movie was very well received. Um, it adds to its domestic total to almost 100, a little bit over 145 million, getting close to 150 million. Its budget wasn't that large for the type of movie it was. I want to say again, it was maybe around $100 million, but even worldwide, we're seeing it, getting close to 300 million total, with around 287 million right now. So Sonic 2 has definitely taken the momentum of the first movie that happened right before COVID, and has came out as a crowd pleasing family film that is doing strong in its third weekend of business. Think of it this way: the Bad Guys just came out last week in its first week, and that's generally when you get your biggest weekend total for wide release movies. And it only did roughly around 9 million more than Sonic, a movie that's been in the theaters now for 3 full weekends. It just shows that Sonic has incredible legs. It has a great base behind it, and it even outperformed two other movies that came out this weekend. And I'll go more into that story later on with The Northman and The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. Finally got the name of that movie down, and some other stuff here as we go. Now, the third movie is one I do want to talk about a lot, and that's The Fantastic Beasts: Secrets of Dumbledore. This movie I don't think was very well done overall. I think it had some major issues with its advertising in some ways, and I also think there's a lot of stuff going on with this movie in the background that are making people just not go to it. Um, you know, yes, it has a $14 million second weekend, but this movie is budgeted at around 200 plus million dollars. And when you see drop percentages on their first weekend to second weekend that is around above 60 to 65%, that's showing that their word of mouth on this movie isn't very good, and that there's not that many people compared to something like Sonic that's under 50% going back and seeing this movie in week two. Its domestic total is a little bit over 67 million, and its worldwide total is just barely getting over 280 million. Um, and I think, the Harry Potter Wizarding World franchise, we're seeing a little bit of a divide here between a worldwide audience and a domestic audience. When you look at that, it's over 4 times as much as, the international market is really pulling in double what the domestic total is. And the only other movie you see that with is The Bad Guy starting out. but it also started out internationally about a week before it did domestically. I think with the Fantastic Beasts: Secrets of Dumbledore, we're seeing a couple things. One, the base characters that are in the Fantastic Beasts movies, your Newt Scamanders, your Jacob Kowalski, your Queenie and Tina, and even the new Dumbledore and Grindelwald, aren't getting people back to the theater, and people aren't connecting to them enough as individuals, as we saw with the Harry Potter franchise, with the terrific portrayals of Ronald Weasley, Harry Potter, and Hermione Granger by Rupert Grint, Daniel Radcliffe, and Emma Watson. I've been going back and rewatching those movies in my spare time before I go to bed each night, if I have time. And you can just the way the films are made are so much better, and it's more connective to an audience, and it's something that feels more relatable. Where these Fantastic Beasts movies, especially the last two, feel very budgeted, like it's being written for the next scene that is happening in the movie just to get you to the end, where the Harry Potter movies a lot of times told a story throughout. Um, and I think that's one reason why it's not having a box office success as Warner Brothers has hoped. I also think if you look at this movie marketing wise, you have Johnny Depp, you know, basically being asked to resign from his role as Grindelwald, given his allegations and the potential domestic abuse between him and his wife Amber Heard. And with Amber Heard not being taken off her projects, there's a core group of fans online that don't want to support this movie because they feel like Depp and was wrong by Warner Brothers. You have one of the lead characters, Ezra Miller, playing um, the main character who is a potential Dumbledore in this movie, Credence, who is now being, if you follow movie news and stuff like that, he's been arrested now, or they've been arrested now twice, and had massive issues in Hawaii for just a little bit of a mental breakdown, but just harassing people and causing, violence in some ways, much worse than a Will Smith slap, in my opinion. So there's somebody you can't really talk about being in your movie, and you have to hide from the advertising. And then you have J.K. Rowling, whether you agree with her or not. Some of her language on the LGBT transgender status, um, and her double tripling down, whether it's her opinion or not. I'm not going to sit here and say who's right and who's wrong, whatever. That's not what this channel's about. But it has had an effect, and there's a lot of people that she, rightfully is upset in their ways, that don't want to support a movie that she's producing and writing. And I think, as a PR nightmare, that everything that I just said has kind of been put together in this big ball that has become, the secrets of Dumbledore's massive underperformance at the box office. This is a movie that's going to struggle to make its money back in theaters, so it's going to have to perform well on HBO Max, and some, renting and buying markets like Amazon and Apple, to really become a profitable type movie, and to really move forward with this franchise. I do think we're going to get one more, because I think there is a promise of a conflict between Dumbledore and Grindelwald, who was played very well by Mads Mikkelsen in this movie. But I don't know if we're going to see it be called Fantastic Beasts. I don't think we're going to see the Fantastic Beasts main characters back, because they clearly haven't shown a connection to the audience like the previous Wizarding Worlds franchise of Harry Potter has. Um, it'll be interesting to see if this continues to drop at that 60+% week over week over week, because that's just an indication of a movie that is struggling to find a good audience with it. Um, Especially here domestically in the US and Canada. That's a very, very poor result for a Harry Potter film in the domestic total after 2 weeks. That's something you would see maybe on an opening weekend itself, not 2 full weeks into a movie's run. Um, Next up, we have the second place finisher of the three movies who premiered this weekend, which is The Northman, a Robert Eggers movie that is taking a Viking Norse tale and bringing it to the big screen. It debuts at about $12 million. Obviously, that doesn't drop because it's its first weekend. Um, and it has a little bit over 23 million, getting close to 24 million worldwide. Now, this movie had a large budget of around 70 to 80 million dollars, which means it's not going to make its money back. It would have to hold this amount like for 4 weekends in a row to flirt with the idea that it's going to make its money back in theaters. And I think what happened with the Northmen um, is that so many adult looking movies just came out at the same time. I also think because of this being a Viking tale, you know, the numbers on it are very heavily Caucasian, which I'm not trying to get into a race here per se, but studies have shown with box office movies that you can't really just bank on the Caucasian white race to come out and give you a strong blockbuster movie. With this being a Viking, movie where the cast is all of Caucasian and is white, you didn't get a big audience from any of the minority communities like African Americans or Hispanics. And when you have that happen and you have a very adult range movie, this was a very hard R movie, you're not going to get the box office you need to support the budget that you had. Now, I love The Northman. I think I put it up on my list as one of my favorite movies of the year so far and a true cinematic experience. But I also know it got a B cinema score, which says the audience going into this movie did not like the movie or it was not what it was expected. I have to say this is somehow very normal for Robert Eggers movies. Um, this movie, in terms of its trailers, was billed as a Braveheart style action movie, and it's just not that. It's a more Shakespearean style drama that has great action and great visuals in it. But if you're going to see an action Viking movie, I can see why people are disappointed in this movie coming out. But I think if you go in knowing what it is, it's truly a fantastic movie. But definitely the total that it has this weekend and the fact that it wasn't able to push above Sonic or Fantastic Beasts means it's definitely going to need to find some type of streaming service and some type of renting buying market to make its money back and to um, give Robert Eggers the green light to make another high budget artistic movie like this in the future. And I hope it gets that because the movie was so well done, so well made that I really really hope that it can have that potential. Now, the unbearable weight of massive talent had what I feel is a dissatisfying box office opening. It opened, domestically here a little bit over $7 million, and it didn't even make $10 million worldwide. Why do I think that is? First off, this adult marketplace that we have here, and you'll see with number six, you're competing with three adult style movies that are very artistic and really are marketed towards the film community in The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, The Northman, and Everything Everywhere All at Once. Between those three movies, you have about a $26 million domestic total for a weekend, something that would have put it above the bad guys, for say. But you have three of these very artistically well done movies all out on the same weekend, and people are all still going to see them. Even Everything Everywhere All at Once, I'll go into a second, and what its totals were after its fourth weekend total, third weekend of wide release, and the title of this movie. Um, I've been telling my family and friends this is the Nick Cage movie. You even saw at the beginning of this video that I couldn't even remember the name of it just off the top of my head like I thought I would because it is such a long, mouthful name that isn't very relatable to the to the movie's image itself. And I think with a title like that, if you're somebody who's just looking at things in an app that you're or online that you're buying tickets, you'll see that title and you'll go just breeze right by it because you don't want to look into what exactly this jargon of a title really is. And even though they marketed it very well as a Nick Cage movie, and it was a delightful buddy comedy, I just think the title and its relatability, in its spot in the release date, it's kind of set it up to fail. I'm not sure what the budget was on this movie, but given that it just started out, it's having such low totals early on, I imagine it's going to be tough for it to make its budget back. It's definitely a movie that it's going to need to go to streaming. It's going to need to be a good renting and buying movie. But I just think this movie's performance out the gate, and we'll see when it drops. So movies like The Northman and The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, there is no new movies coming out next weekend. So the chances for them to hold at around that 40 to 50% with these artistic style movies that had this low opening box office um, is pretty high. So if it comes back at like a 40% to 30%, range of drop, I think this movie is doing iffy. But if for either of these movies to truly succeed, they need to come back with like a sub 20% drop, um, which would be indicating that they are really high quality and the word of mouth on them is really good. But this is a very bad opening weekend for this Nicolas Cage movie that I found was perfectly delightful, and we'll see how word of mouth does for it as the week, this next week goes on. If people are going to come and see it, or if it's going to have that normal 40, 50 to 60% drop that would really, cement these runs as being massive issues. And again, I can't understand why we have three beautifully made artistic films dropped all at the same time in April, all fighting for basically the same audience in the box office. Yes, we see the Bad Guys 2 and Sonic 2 having very strong totals for family films, but that is a marketplace that's always been a strong base, and we're already seeing with other movies like Sing 2 and other family movies that there is a strong market for family movies right now that can support one or two movies at the same time. But the adult the very adult R-rated artistic films is not something that you can really support 2 to 3 movies fighting in the same box office month. This is something that needed to be spread out. And yes, I understand you're going to have box office hits coming out like Top Gun 2, Jurassic World, Multiverse of Madness, Thor Love and Thunder, all these other movies coming out in the summertime, but you could have placed one of these movies in summer at some point and picked up the counter programming weight and have it run for a full month where it's really the only counter programmed adult content to it. And I think they would have had a much better box office run, but they got all pushed into April here, and I think it's really harming their box office totals. Um, and I think the unbearable weight of massive talent is going to be the biggest loser of that as we look back later on in the year. So next up, we're going to come over here and see is the bottom half of the box office, 6 through 10. And just like I was saying, we've had an adult, oriented, artistic movie, everything, everywhere, all at once, and it's fourth weekend total, third weekend, having a wide release domestically, made again a little bit over $5 million. This movie had a very slow rollout. It doesn't take up the most theaters, but it has strong word of mouth and audience appeal, which is why we see that its drop percentage is only 12.3% after that many weeks. This is normal of very high quality, um, artistic adult films. The word of mouth in it is very, very strong for a lot of people. I know people in my family that have gone to see the movie based off of my personal preference of it, and description of it. Its domestic total is a little bit under 27 million, which for a $20 million budgeted movie, it still has a little bit of work to make it profitable in theaters. But this is a movie that I think is going to be rented a lot, and I think this is a movie that's going to be bought a lot digitally once it hits that market in the next month or so. So this movie, I think, is going to make its money back, especially being an awards contender. Once it happens to get into the award season next winter, I think that this movie will peak back again in all of those rental markets and buying markets, and will really make a living there when it gets nominated for some awards, like I imagine it will be. But again, this movie, I wonder how well it would have done, if it wasn't having to fight this weekend with the Northman and with the the immeasurable weight of massive talent. Again, that title is not great. Um, and everything everywhere all at once features that issue with the title, and it's just so much of a mouthful that even my mom tells me it's a mouthful movie. Um, how would it have done if it wasn't again competing with those two similar fan bases? Would we have seen more people come to this movie and might have, instead of it had a negative drop percentage, maybe it would have had a positive drop percentages like it had previous weeks and gone up in totals? Either way, this is the type of run that both the Northmen and the immeasurable weight of massive talent are hoping to have. The problem is for the Northmen, it is if you look at the domestic and worldwide total, um, it's needing to have something that's going to be 10 times, not 10 times, but 9 or 8 times the amount that we have here for everything everywhere all at once to be profitable or successful. And it just it won't do that. It won't have that type of legs. Coming in at number 7 after well over a month in theaters is The Lost City, having just a little bit over $4 million total. It dropped under 30%, which is pretty normal when movies are pretty strong word of mouth and have been in theaters for that long. It definitely has a consistent audience base, has people going back either to see it or bringing their friends to go and see it. Its domestic total is around 85 million right now. Worldwide total a little bit over 125 million. I think this tells two stories. One, it shows that domestically this movie made over 2 times as much as it did in just the international box office. So this rom-commy style feel is something that's definitely more American centric and American advertised. But with the very easy budget that it had, this is a movie that for Paramount that has made a lot of money for it and has really kind of shown that you can make these, I want to say, modestly budgeted rom coms that are that have this audience appeal that can be successful now. The Lost City is a purely successful movie in the box office this year. I'm sad that it won't hit $100 million, which is kind of like the benchmark total of a superb box office, in North America. But it performed very well. It has a very good audience to it. I am surprised to see it holding up so well after it's been out for so long. But for Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum and even Daniel Radcliffe, this is something that they're going to put in their feather and their cap as a very strong performance of a movie that I wouldn't be surprised if they greenlight a sequel. I don't think they should per se, but they very well may. Um, and it definitely gives them both some ammo when it comes to signing on the movies that maybe not the biggest blockbuster style movies, but if you're looking for a movie budgeted around $30 to $40 million, you can rely on any of those three stars, in a comedic role to bring an audience per se. I imagine. Um, Next up is Father Stew. This movie has only been released domestically in North America. It is a kind of Christian based film. I haven't got to see it just yet. This is the only movie on this list that I haven't seen. Maybe I'll see it next weekend since there's nothing out new in theaters. But it features Mark Wahlberg. It has a modest run. It isn't the big budgeted movie, but I think it's gonna make its budget back and a little bit of profit for it. Um, it isn't anything spectacular. It definitely, I think, has been boxed out a bit by movies like The Immeasurable Weight of Massive Talent and Everything Everywhere All at Once. For some of the adults that may go see, either one of those movies, I think it's kind of been boxed out a bit. But for a Christian kind of film, it's performing a little bit under expectations, but it's going to make its money back, and Mark Wahlberg will be just fine. Um, Overall, he already had good box office results with Uncharted, though makes you wonder, was Uncharted's box office results because of Mark Wahlberg being led to it, or was it Tom Holland coming off Spider-Man: No Way Home and kind of becoming the movie star of somebody in his late 20s, very much like a Tom Cruise was back in the 1980s and 1990s. So Wahlberg will have to see in his next movie if he continues to have a similar struggle without a star-studded cast around him. But Father Stew's doing perfectly fine. It might fall out of the box office top 10 here next week. It probably will hold over since nothing's new. But it's a respectable run and a movie that's budgeted exactly where it should be, making its money back and probably a little bit more. Um, Next up, we have two movies that came out on the same weekend that I think have similar tales of just audience distaste, and that is Morbius, that came just over 2 million. Again, this movie came out the week after The Lost City, 1 week or 2 weeks after The Lost City, and it's you see it's dropping still 50% every weekend, and it's underperforming The Lost City now by $2 million. Um, and it hasn't even been able to make $70 million domestically. Hasn't gotten anywhere close to $200 million worldwide. This is a movie that was budgeted probably around 80 to $100 million. So it'll probably after it hits the streaming market, it'll probably break even and make some money back. But for Sony and a Spider-Man franchise that they're building on their own, separate from the MCU, this is a horrible result. And I can't think of any reason why we're getting this result besides it being just a very bad movie with very bad word of mouth. Morbius has been dropping 50 to 60 to even 70% the second weekend every week, and it's just getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller to the point now where it's number 9 out of 10, and it's being destroyed by movies that have came out before it. It's barely hanging on. It is something that once the Multiverse of Madness comes out, Morbius is probably going to drop completely off this map. And again, you make a very, very bad movie like that, you move it like you did. You set up a high false advertising in the ad campaign, and you're going to have a box office result like this. Now, this is a box office that Fantastic Beasts is trying to avoid in a much larger way. They have similar numbers over week to week a little bit. Fantastic Beasts performing a little bit better and a little bit stronger, but they don't want to see it come back in a domestic total that's going to have it hit 75 to $80 million total, and have the consistent drops that Morbius had. But yeah, this movie definitely is not something Sony is going to be proud about. And if I were them, anybody who was on this project, I would think twice about before putting them on another project, in your Spider Verse or any Sony project at the moment. Not without a very limited budget per se. And then Ambulance, the Michael Bay movie, coming in number 10 at just under $2 million. It had again another movie that has had a 50% drop, dropping like this consistently. It has only about $20 million here domestically, and a worldwide total just under 50 million. Not even really getting close to 50 million. Now this is a movie that only was budgeted for about 20 million in itself, so it's gonna make its money back per se. But this advertising campaign was outright garbage, and the movie, while not horrible per se. I think Michael Bay's reputation as a filmmaker has gone down the tubes, um, and with the marketing being so LA centric and being so bland as what they were offering, and not showcasing the best parts of what the movie would like, it's had a pretty soft and uninspiring domestic run. When you make a movie like this for $20 million with Michael Bay, you're hoping that you can at least get 100 million worldwide, if not more, and it can be turned into one of these big financial box office successes. But it's really just going to be a movie that made its money back in maybe $5 or $10 million, which is still good for the studio, but it's definitely not going to be what they were looking for overall, when it comes to the movies. But yeah, that kind of wraps up my top 10 here for the box office this weekend. I think next weekend, without having any new movies come out, I'm probably going to add another chart here and shorten up the movies, because I could have been telling these stories week to week with things like The Lost City and Morbius, so I could have easily have glossed over it. But I think next week I'm going to bring in a new chart, which is going to be the two new charts: the box office top 10 for the year of 2022, as well as the box office top 10 of worldwide of 2022. And we'll use that chart as we go on too, and have little discussions here and there on that. But if you like this video, please give it a like. If you have any thoughts on the box office overall, if you have any suggestions for this weekly video that I plan to put out, leave them in the comments below. Feel free to check out any of the reviews for any of these movies besides Father Stew. I have them on my channel here. I'm excited for the summer movie season to come. April overall, looking as a month, has had a lot of great movies come out, and I've been in, but also a lot of bad movies come out too. But I'm excited to get started on this new project. I'm excited to get started on the summer movie season. Again, leave a like, leave a subscribe, comment down below what your thoughts are, and wherever you're at, stay safe and have a great day. See ya.